Hey guys, this is John. In this video, I'm going to take you through a training method that is pretty fun and instructive, and I also suspect it will be new for many of the viewers out there. And that training method is solitaire chess. Solitaire chess is basically taking a game and looking at it from one particular side, usually the side who won the game, and trying to predict the moves that they played. And you can do this for really any game. I have chosen a game between two notable players for this one, but you can use this as a way to kind of hone your instincts, to analyze an opening maybe you're interested in, to look at the games of a player whose style you identify with. It's really a nice way to put yourself in the mind of someone who's achieved something in chess and basically try to emulate them and improve your skills. So, what I'll be doing is trying to guess the moves of Magnus Carlsen in a game that he played in January against Evgeny Tomashevsky. And this is played in the Tata Steel Tournament. And of course, for this method to work, you cannot have seen the game previously. I happened to be kind of busy in January. I was playing a tournament and busy with work and such. So I missed much of the Tata Steel Tournament. There were 13 rounds, so there were a lot of games. So I chose this game of Magnus's to look over and to see if I can match my suggested moves with what he played in the game. And I had to grab this game carefully, right? Like, I don't want to spoil it by seeing the moves in advance. So I basically downloaded the PGN from chessgames.com, put it in my chess base, and tried not to look at anything. The only thing I saw was the first move, which was d4 by white. So when you're doing solitaire chess, you don't want to spend too much time on the opening, if at all, because it's kind of pointless to try to predict opening theory moves. I guess you could if you really wanted to, but you want to get to some point shortly after the opening where things really start to pick up. So let's begin. So Magnus played d4. Tomashevsky played knight f6. Magnus played knight f3. Tomashevsky played e6. And Magnus plays bishop f4, the London system. Okay. Tomashevsky responds with b6. Magnus plays e3 in reply. Bishop b7, this all looks normal. Black is just getting their light square bishop on an effective diagonal. Magnus plays h3, logical move. Oftentimes white can try to save the dark square bishop. You can see that he gains the ability to play bishop h2 in the case that black plays this and tries to attack the bishop on f4. Tomashevsky plays bishop e7. Magnus replies bishop d3, castles, c5, striking at the pawn on d4. Magnus plays c3, knight c6, developing, knight bd2, and d5. Okay, so this is just an approximation, but this looks like a good point to start thinking about the position and trying to predict Magnus's moves. Up until this point, I pretty much agree 100% with what he's done. Maybe there's some stylistic things here and there, but nothing of great interest has happened. So now I'm going to try to predict the moves from this point forward. One thing you can do if you want to challenge yourself, you can use a timer. You can set a timer for a couple minutes, maybe 1 to 3 minutes per move, just so you don't think forever and ever about a particular position. I'm not going to do that, but you can incorporate that if you like. So d5, this does block black's light square bishop. My first instinct is just put the queen on e2, because I know in past experiences on the white side of the London, my limited experience on the white side of the London, mainly from the match with Nicolas Huschenbet, that the queen does belong there. I don't think you want to play queen c2, even though that connects the rooks as well, because black is liable to post a rook on c8 to oppose the queen. So queen e2 is a move that I instantly like. With queen e2, you have ideas of playing for e4 and also having the bishop come into a6. Other ideas you might consider would be knight e5, just trying to jump into the center and post up that knight. But if black can just trade on e5, I don't know if I like that option so much. Sometimes white goes a3 in an attempt to play b4. So that does cross my mind, but it seems premature. So I think I will go with queen e2. All right, so I got one correct there, queen e2. I really should have a little tally saying how many I get right or wrong. Mental note for future videos. All right, so Tomashevsky played bishop d6 in reply, offering a trade. So after bishop d6, I feel like posting the knight on e5 has more value now, because black can't play knight takes e5 and reply then. We play d takes e5 and fork the two pieces. So I could do that, but if he plays something like queen c7, what are we doing then? Queen c7 would just hammer the knight on e5, and just trading on c6 doesn't look inspiring. Maybe knight e5, queen c7, knight df3. Trying to support that knight. So even though I'm trying to predict one move at a time, that doesn't mean I'm not looking several moves ahead, because you're treating this just like you would a position in a tournament game in front of you, right? Like, I'm not just going to try to make the move that first comes to mind and I think Magnus might have played. I want to try to have a rationale like he had in the game, and that might involve calculating some lines. So yeah, knight e5 is possible, queen c7, knight df3. What else could be played here? Something to trade on d6. Bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, maybe followed by e4, breaking in the center. Bishop a6 is another move that's often played, just trying to swap the light square bishops. I don't think I want to leave the bishop here or retreat it. Maybe you could make an argument for allowing black to play bishop takes f4 and then playing e takes f4 and gaining a stranglehold on e5, but somehow I don't think Magnus did that. So knight e5 again is catching my eye. There's some cool tricks with knight e5. Like if knight e5, black plays knight d7 trying to undermine, well, that would be bad in view of knight takes c6, bishop takes c6, bishop takes d6. But sometimes even knight takes f7 is possible, because that knight d7 move would sever the coordination between the black queen and the bishop. So knight e5 is a maybe. Bishop takes d6. Do we really like that? Because it seems like after queen takes d6, we've only helped black connect their rooks and maybe achieve the e5 break. Maybe bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, bishop b5. Trying to dissuade black from playing e5, but no, I doubt it. It's just not looking right. If bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, probably e4 is what white would do. Looking at knight e5 again, knight e5, queen c7, knight df3. Still not 100% sure about that one. Let me get rid of some of these arrows. Tough decision already here on move 11. If I were Magnus, what would I do? I may not have to think about it so much if I were Magnus. I would just know. I would feel it. If I had more experience in the London too, this could be helpful as well. But again, my experience in this opening is limited. Just having another gander at bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, e4. That's a forcing line. D takes e4, knight takes e4. Let's say knight takes e4, queen takes e4, threatening mate. Maybe induce black to play f5, something like that. Well, if I was using a timer, my timer would be up. I'm gonna go with bishop takes d6. So let's see if that was played. No, rook fe1. Okay. Yeah, subtle move. So he's basically saying, I'm okay with a bishop trade on f4. So bishop takes f4, e takes f4 is a-okay by Magnus. And let's see what Tomashevsky did. Tomashevsky did not take, and instead maneuvers his knight. Okay. Well, already 11 moves into the game, I have a new idea in my mental arsenal that it's okay to allow that trade on f4, doubling the pawns. Interesting. Okay, so knight e7. Is black maneuvering that knight to the king side, like knight g6 or knight f5, something like that? Or is black trying to stop white from playing e4, unleashing the dark square bishop, perhaps? Here, I could trade on d6 and then play knight e5. Maybe the fact that this knight is no longer on c6 makes me more likely to do it. If black does not take on f4, it's hard to see how rook e1 is going to benefit white unless white is trading and playing for e4 themselves. But I don't think that works out so well. Bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, e4. D takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop. That's too many swaps. I don't think there's much there. So knight e5 is what's looking most tempting for me. Or bishop takes, queen takes, and then knight e5. One of the two. Taking first seems more harmonious to me because I'm not sure I want the bishop kind of stuck behind on f4 after I post the knight up on e5. Let's go with that. I'm going to say bishop takes d6. Once again. No, rook a d1. So it plays another centralization move. Keeping the tension. Magnus is good at that. All right, knight g6 was played, so hitting that bishop. Now it's probably decision time as far as this piece is concerned. Should I suggest trading once more? Well, if trade here, e4 isn't going to work as well anymore because of knight f4. We could play knight e5. So get the knight entrenched on that square. I don't think bishop g5 makes much sense. Pulling the bishop back to h2 doesn't make much sense. So putting something on e5, however, I could very well see that being played. If knight e5, what if queen c7? Attacking that knight once again. Not much doing there. Bishop takes g6 seems out of the question. I don't think I want to part with my light square bishop. Bishop e5 maybe? Nah, not convinced. Just bishop takes e5 and reply, most likely. Bishop takes d6, queen takes d6. Bishop a6, perhaps. I feel there's not enough going on in that position. Must be some reason he centralized the rooks, like some sort of breakthrough he's going for. If it's not e4, then what is it? Like d takes c5 and c4? Some combination of those moves? I still don't like bishop takes g6. Don't think I want to trade my light square bishop for that knight. But I do need to resolve this situation. Is g3 crazy? Seems like a silly move to make, cutting off the bishop's retreat, but I wonder if it's that bad. Yeah, it's probably no good. Bishop g5. What about bishop g5? So if they play h6, that does weaken g6 somewhat. But bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. I still can't go e4 due to knight f4. And bishop g5, h6, bishop takes g6, just f takes g6 seems perfectly fine. So I don't think it's bishop g5. Bishop g3 or bishop h2. Should I pay those more heed? No, still not convinced by those. Okay, I'm going to go with knight e5, I think. So put the knight in the center. One time. Let's see it, Magnus. Bishop takes g6. Wow. So the move I poo-pooed twice. I said on 2 separate occasions, bishop takes g6 is not the move I would play, was actually played. That's surprising. Just replay that for a second before we go on, because that bishop is such a nice piece here. You see white has all these pawns on dark squares. b2, c3, d4, e3, f2. So that bishop is nicely nestled in between them, operating on both wings. It's got beautiful diagonals to work with. And he just trades it for the knight. So I assume Tomashevsky's going to take with the h-pawn. He does. Okay, so now what's Magnus's idea? Now the attack on f4 has been diminished. There's no double attack there anymore. We can still try to get a piece up to e5, but he seems to have been resisting that for the last couple moves. Last 3 moves I've guessed incorrectly, by the way, if you're keeping track at home. So is now the time to go knight e5? Or play something else? Knight e5 would be good timing, I believe, because, again, knight d7 is not working due to knight takes f7. So if knight e5, probably queen c7 would be the answer. But where is he going after that? Like, knight e5, what's the big deal? Where's the beef? Maybe he's going to go bishop g5 here. Bishop g5, just switch the diagonal for the bishop. Black could just escape the pin, though, with queen c7. I don't think white wants to play bishop takes f6. Parting with both bishops would be extreme. And operating with 2 knights versus 2 bishops. So bishop g5, queen c7 seems fine for black. So what about knight e5? Again, queen c7 just comes to mind. Need to get this knight in the game. This knight is not doing much, is it? I mean, for that matter, could we do something kind of radical, like taking on c5? Let's say we play d takes c5, and then if b takes c5, maybe something involving bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, knight c4. This is all very vague right now, and that particular application of it does not work, but maybe there is a reason why he played rook d1 and wants the rook lined up with the queen. I mean, you could even consider knight c4 right away, because if d takes c4, there's d takes c5, opening up a double attack on the bishop, but knight c4, there's bishop takes f4 in between moves, so that's not working for white. But I kind of see some stuff happening down these files now. We could trade and then just play knight e5. What if we do that? So bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, knight e5, knight d7, natural move to try to challenge the knight, f4. And then if knight takes e5, f takes e5, that kingside scenario may turn out well for white, and they could try to get into a good knight versus bad bishop position. I know I was talking about this knight not being great immediately, but if it ever lands on e5 after this knight has been exchanged, white could get a strategic grip on the position. So is now finally the moment to trade and then play knight e5. Yeah, I'm going to say so. So bishop takes d6, and if queen takes d6, knight e5. So let's hope for bishop takes d6. Yes, finally got one. All right. So queen takes d6. And we haven't really happened upon a absolutely forced recapture yet that we're trying to guess. So when that comes up, I won't spend much time on that, obviously. Those pretty forced recaptures you can just kind of gloss over. Not hard to predict. So queen takes d6. All right, am I going to put my money where my mouth is and suggest knight e5? I don't see a reason to deviate. I mean, I looked briefly at d takes c5, trying to get the rook working towards the black queen on d6, but it's just not working. So let's dive in. Knight e5. There we go. Okay. And Tomashevsky plays g5. So trying to ensure that he has some influence on the f4 square. But isn't the pawn kind of exposed here? If we play knight df3, we'd be attacking it, and already it's awkward for black to defend it. They'd have to play knight e4 to do so. f4 seems extreme to me. I don't know about that move. Or sorry, g5 seems f4. G5 seems extreme. I can't even talk right now. This game is confusing me so much. So I could play f4 and try to challenge that pawn right away. f4, g takes f4, e takes f4. We get some enhanced control over the e file and really ensure our knight's dominance on e5. Is there any other way to attack this pawn? What if we play like queen f3, looking to just play queen g3 and attack the pawn that way? So candidate moves here, queen f3, knight df3, and f4. Those are the main moves I'm looking at. I assume on queen f3, black will respond with knight e4. And then knight takes e4, d takes e4. Let's say queen, where to put the queen in that case? Queen g4 maybe? Attacking this pawn. Then I could see problems cropping up down the d file. So if queen f3, knight e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, queen g4, or queen h5, one of the two maybe. So let's say queen g4, and then f6, knight g6, hitting the rook. Rook f d8, I suppose, but I do have d takes c5. This d takes c5 move is going to be killer if we can unleash it at the right moment. I did choose this game, by the way, because it wasn't super long. It's 30 moves. So we're halfway through this game. Yeah, queen f3. It's crude, trying to get the queen over to g3 to attack the pawn, but it seems to be effective. Maybe queen f3, queen e7 will be black's idea. And then if queen g3, maybe knight h5, so the queen on e7 can protect the pawn. I could see that working for them, perhaps. So the other couple moves I was looking at were knight df3 and f4. Again, knight df3 I think will be met by knight e4. I'm not sure what's happening there. Maybe d takes c5? Because if queen takes c5, there's knight d7 forking the queen and the rook. So knight df3, knight e4, d takes c5. But just b takes c5 back. Even knight takes c5 might be playable. Because I don't want to run into a superfluous knight issue whereby my knight on f3 and my knight that's already on e5 are just jockeying for the same squares. That's a common issue with connected knights you want to try to avoid. So knight df3, knight e4. What then? Maybe h4? G takes h4, knight takes h4. Not super thrilled about that continuation. I was liking queen f3 until I saw queen e7 as a possible means of defense for black. So what about f4? That's the remaining move that I haven't put a lot of analytical time into yet. So if f4, g takes f4, e takes f4, we just got great control over e5. If knight e4, knight takes e4, D takes e4. That D takes c5 move could be very handy once again. I could see that working out well. f4 is the most direct move of all of these that I'm considering. Like knight df3, queen f3, we're trying to win that pawn and harass black a little bit, but f4 is just like I'm advancing, offering to trade, and trying to open lines. Maybe playing for an attack against black's king or something in the center. Yeah, queen f3 I've ruled out at this point. Knight df3, knight e4 I'm not super happy about, so I'm going to say f4. See if Magnus made that pawn advance. He does play f4. Okay. Tomashevsky takes. So here's a case where it looks like pretty much a forced recapture. I mean, maybe there could be some subtlety here, but I also thought e takes f4 would be played. I'm not going to spend like 5 minutes trying to figure out whether this is actually the best move. I think it is. So, oh, and as I say that, rook f1. Well, this is this is an experimental video, guys. I'm not saying my training methods are perfect. When you're trying to guess the moves of the best player in the world by a good margin, you're probably going to embarrass yourself a time or two. And I have egg on my face because I didn't see rook f1 coming at all. Wow. I mean, that would be an easy move to miss. My line of thinking with f4 was simply just recapture and try to use the great outpost for the knight. But rook f1, wow. And this might have came as a surprise to Tomashevsky as well. Okay, so let's see what he does. He plays knight d7. So backing it up for a second, if f takes e3 is played, then I assume the idea is rook takes f6, trying to strip away the defenders of black's king. Maybe we'll look at that in the postgame. So Tomashevsky says, all right, good idea, Magnus, and plays knight d7. So I would assume we'd like to recover the pawn. But if he passed on e takes f4 before, I somehow do not get the sense that he's going to play it now. So what about knight takes d7, queen takes d7, rook takes f4? Do we keep open the lines that way? Because if black ever plays f5 trying to stop a knight from coming into e5, that looks like strategic suicide if white can get the knight in. Or f5 trying to stop the rook's influence down the f-file. White could try to get the other knight into into e5. All right, so knight takes d7, queen takes d7, rook takes f4, certainly appealing. But I wouldn't completely rule out him taking with the e-pawn, either right now or after the trade of knights on d7. Maybe rook f1's function was just to get him to play his knight away. And we still wouldn't mind taking with the e-pawn. And if we do take with the e-pawn, is it better to do it now or trade on d7 first? Well, taking on e4 creates more tension, and I think black's unlikely to play knight takes e5 in that case. Like, say e takes f4, knight takes e5, f takes e5 hitting the queen, queen e7. White might even be able to uncork rook f6 there, which is a nifty idea. G takes f6, queen g4 check. Black's king is completely exposed and possibly subject to mating attacks. So if e takes f4, what will black do? Maybe f6 to challenge the knight? Or move the knight away, which would be kind of inconsistent, though, it seems to me. But knight takes d7 has a clarity about it, just ensuring that we get rid of that knight. Knight takes d7, queen takes d7, and then rook takes or e takes f4. But I kind of think if knight takes d7, queen takes d7, rook takes f4, black just might play f6 and put a couple of pawns on the 6th rank, trying to barricade and lessen the impact of rook df1 and also knight f3, because the e5 square will be covered by a black pawn. E takes f4 seems like the most unpleasant somehow here. Let's go with that one. E takes f4. So pawn capture. Wow, queen h5. Out of nowhere. So Magnus is thinking, go for the kill. So is his idea that if f takes e3, he's going to play knight d to f3 and then try to get the knight up to g5? Oh, I guess he's just going to take on f7. So f takes e3 is impossible due to white crashing through on f7. Wow. Probably with the knight. Knight takes f7, threatening the queen and also threatening mate on h8. Yeah, I mean, you can see that move was not even on my radar. So black plays knight f6, hitting the queen. Now where to put the queen? g5 or h4 are the most likely moves. Probably h4. At least that's the move that immediately comes to mind for me because that stays out of range of black's knight. If queen g5, there is knight h7 hitting the queen again. So if you stay 2 squares away diagonally from a knight, it's difficult for the knight to go attack you. It takes the knight, 3 moves to do so, I think. So queen h4. So if queen h4 is played, what am I doing in the case of f takes e3? Are we going bombs away, rook takes f6? And if so, what's happening after e takes d2? So queen h4, f takes e3, rook takes f6, e takes d2. I feel like that's on the verge of a win for white, but could we play something cool like rook takes f7, rook takes f7, queen h8 check, king takes h8, knight takes f7 check? Does that work? That doesn't win material, though. It looked really flashy, but it doesn't win material. Probably just knight takes No, not knight takes f7. So let me recalibrate here. Queen h4, f takes e3, rook takes f6, e takes d2. It seems like there should be a tactic there, but I'm not seeing it. This knight takes f7, rook takes f7. He covers. I'm even looking at wacky stuff like rook h6, g takes h6, queen g4 check, but there's king h7. So that's in the case of queen h4. Maybe queen h4, f takes e3, he's just going to play knight d to f3 and try to go knight g5. But that's risky, right? Because black has e2 forking the 2 rooks. So queen h4, f takes e3, knight d f3, e2. And if white does not deliver mate there, he's probably losing because we're sacking a lot of material. So if I can't figure out what to do after the capture on e3, I don't think I can, in clear conscience, suggest queen h4, as tempting as it looks. Let's look at that line again. Queen h4, f takes e3, rook takes f6. And then take on d2. I'm assuming that if g takes f6, that knight g4 is going to kill black. I haven't calculated that too far, but I'm pretty sure that wins. So the capture on d2 is critical. Maybe we could just play rook takes d2 there. If black can't take the rook on f6, then he's got to be suffering. Because again, g takes f6, knight g4. That's, I mean, the queen and the knight in close proximity to black's exposed king. Black may not be long for this world. Okay, so I'm liking queen h4. Queen g5 I haven't looked too deeply into, but the fact that black has knight h7 kind of put me off that move. Knight h7 helps him free up f6. I think he would like to play f6 if he could to challenge that knight. So let's go with queen h4. Queen h4 was played. Okay. And now queen d8. Okay, so I didn't go too much further than f takes e3 in trying to predict what black would do here, but Tomashevsky evidently decided it was necessary to reinforce this knight. All right. So are we finally going to take this pawn on f4? There's been a lull while we've done other things, but do we take it now? And if we do take it, which way do we take? Probably queen or rook. Rook takes would be the move that makes the most sense, in my opinion. Prepare doubling. You stay active. You pressure f6. Black might be looking to play knight d7 after that, trying to trade. So rook takes f4, knight d7, or maybe knight e4. He could try knight e4, looking to swap. A lot of these endgames start to look good for white, though, too. Like, imagine if rook takes f4, knight e4. We could play, let's say, knight takes e4, queen takes h4, rook takes h4, d takes e4, d takes c5, and I gotta believe that white's quite a bit better. B takes c5, rook d7, maybe. Invading on the 7th rank. Black's pawns are in tatters. So there's stuff like that. E takes e4 again does not seem in the spirit of putting the rook on f1. I think black is looking to play knight e4 and, again, offer a trade. So in a lot of these lines, yeah, I'm considering black moving this knight next. Queen takes f4, of course, possible. If white just wants to get rid of the queen alignment here on the diagonal. But white would rather have the rook come up, because after queen takes f4, we're never really threatening to take on f6 with the queen. Whereas rook takes f4, I think rook takes f6 is a more realistic possibility soon. So oftentimes when you have your major pieces in concert, you want the rook in front of the queen. The rook can do more damage, and the queen can serve as backup, the more valuable piece coming in to clean up. The way this game's going, though, I mean, maybe it's none of the above. What about knight df3? Again, this move trying to transfer the knight over. Idea if f takes e3, knight g5, threatening rook takes f6 and mate on h7. Maybe knight df3, knight e4, just offer the trade. I'm still feeling rook takes f4, I gotta say. I'm liking that move. Rook takes f4, knight e4, knight takes e4. Maybe even... Nah, rook takes e4 is probably too drastic. So knight takes e4, queen takes h4, let's say. Rook takes h4, d takes e4. I think it hinges a lot on how much I like that endgame. D takes c5, b takes c5. I said rook d7. Yeah, I think I like that endgame a lot. I do not see black having a happy life there. All right, let's go with rook takes f4. Boom. All right. Well, this, even though I embarrassed myself a few moves ago, it's getting a little bit better at least. So rook takes f4, black plays knight e4. They do go ahead and play this, offering mass trades. So I had already calculated this line. Knight takes e4, queen takes h4, rook takes h4, d takes e4, d takes c5, crucial opening lines. Maybe black can jettison a pawn in that variation and play like rook d8, but I think with the possibility of trading on d8 and then maybe pawn c6, the only thing that gives me pause is white's rook is out of play on the 4th rank in a lot of endgames, but I think that endgame should be good for white still. Can we decline a trade of the queens? Certainly you might look at queen g4 or queen h5 here, but I kind of think on both of those, black might be shooting the queen out to g5. But that could be similar, right? What if we play queen g4? And then if queen g5... then we have rook takes e4. That wins a piece, doesn't it? And rook takes e4 here, they can play d takes e4, mind you, so... We don't want to play rook takes e4 yet. So queen g4, black cannot play queen g5. That's an interesting observation. But they can play f5 and support that knight on e4 and try to kick back the queen. Queen g4, f5, queen somewhere. Let's say queen h5. Then there's queen g5 again, though. That would be defending. You guys know me. I like to play for endgames. I like clear advantages. Not getting our hands too dirty whenever possible. So that's why I'm really liking knight takes e4, queen takes h4, rook takes h4, d takes e4, d takes c5. That's my bread and butter line right now. And then b takes c5, rook d7. And I like the fact that the bishop on b7 is under attack. It doesn't have a lot of good squares. It can't go to c6. The knight's covering that. If it goes to d5, there's c4. So black might have to play like rook b8. And then I was thinking perhaps rook f4, cranking up the pressure on f7. And that just looks like a Magnus-type winning endgame. Maybe there's even knight d7 after rook b8, but I guess he can play a rook to c8. So I'm going with knight takes e4. Show me the money one time. There we go. Okay. No whammies. And black took here. All right, this one I feel pretty safe to say that it was a strict recapture. Rook takes h4. If he threw in some crazy move like knight f6 check, I'll be very surprised. So, yeah. Rook takes h4. Phew. Wipe the sweat off my brow. D takes e4. And here, d takes c5 is what I was saying. Because I think we want to open the d file while we have the chance to invade next move. So d takes c5, b takes c5, rook into d7. I don't see what else white would be going for here. We're not going to mate black with the diminished material. The queens are off the board, and when that happens, that's usually a sign that the position is going to simplify somewhat. So, yeah, I think d takes c5. It's really the only move that makes sense in my eyes. So, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I'm pretty confident. Yep, he did take. Tomashevsky took back. And if you're going to take, you're going to invade on d7. No doubt about it. So rook d7. Anything else to consider? No, I don't think so. None of the other invasion squares are appetizing. Like, we're not going to go to d6. d5, d4 are off limits. We want to shake the bishop from defending the e4 pawn, so let's do this. Yep, rook d7. Tomashevsky plays rook a b8. I actually made a mental error originally or a moment ago when I was discussing this position. I said maybe knight d7 is possible, forking the two rooks, but of course the rook is occupying that square. However, I did say that I think rook f4 is a good move here, attacking the pawn. And I'll tell you why. My rationale is after rook f4, if they play f6 trying to defend and shake the knight, I'm thinking maybe we can even play rook g4 then. So that if black takes the knight on e5, we have mate in a couple, mate in a few. Rook takes g7, so rook g takes g7, king h8, rook h7, king back to g8, rook d to g7, checkmate. It's a nifty mate. So calculating this line again, rook f4, f6, rook g4, he'd have to play g5, which looks tremendously weakening. And maybe white can just go ahead and play h4, although then he could take here. Then he could actually take on e5. Rook takes g5 check, king h8, rook g7. We're still threatening that same mate, and also the bishop's under attack. Rook f4 seems to lead to a lot of nice tactical possibilities. That much is apparent. Because we want to get at f7. That's a clear weakness. We're already attacking it twice. This rook is doing nothing on h4. We need to assign it a task. There's no tactics with rook h8 or anything like that that are working. Maybe we could play rook c7 and go after the c pawn, but that seems kind of slow, and it seems like we're settling if we do that. I like the idea of including this guy too. So I'm going with rook f4. Wow, b3. Huh. Move that comes out of left field. And I should mention, because I've been mentioning things throughout this video, just because we're going over a game played by Magnus, that doesn't mean that he played completely the correct moves all the time. b3 could be the strongest move for all I know, but It may be the case that he makes a mistake here and there. And perhaps my move could be better than what he thought about. But evidently, there was some reason why he didn't play rook f4, because I think that move looks incredibly obvious. But b3, wow. That's basically saying to black, your position is so bad right now, I can just play an improving move, ensure that I never have to worry about like bishop c8, rook takes b2. I guess that was maybe the concern. And secure my position before going about exploiting your weaknesses. Not a fun feeling if you're Tomashevsky. He does have a point that if f6 is played here, then knight g6 will be the answer, hitting the rook and threatening rook h8 mate. So there is that to consider. So Tomashevsky plays a5, launching the a pawn. Okay, now rook f4. I mean, what's the holdup, Magnus? Maybe rook f4 is going to be met by f5. I don't know why I was thinking exclusively about f6 and not f5. But yeah, maybe he's just going to go f5. So now I'm thinking perhaps white is going to start playing against these weaknesses, like rook c7 type moves. If rook c7, the only way black can try to save the c pawn is with rook f to c8, but that would lose the f7 pawn, right? So that doesn't seem good. So maybe rook c7, because note that rook b to c8 is just going to lose the bishop to rook takes b7. Don't think we want to withdraw the knight, so I'm not thinking about knight c4, trying to go after the pawn. That doesn't seem right. It seems weird to surrender the file, rook c7, but black really can't effectively put anything on the d8 square anyways. Okay, so if he didn't play rook f4 last move, I don't know that the inclusion of b3, a5 is really going to sway him and make him play at this move. So, yeah, rook c7, let's do it. Okay, I'm glad I got that one right. Yeah, Magnus's choice on the previous move kind of cued me into looking for that, something slower. The fact that he didn't try to go outright on the king side. So Tomashevsky plays a4. We could take it or ignore it. So take or play rook takes c5. Which one? Knight d7 here, trying to fork the two rooks, is going to run into rook f to c8, I believe, looking for a swap. So I don't like that so much. So just take a4 or take c5. Which one? In either case, black's position is pretty awful, I think. Rook takes c5 seems like the more cohesive move. Just pick up that pawn. If takes, we take back. We don't create any pawn weaknesses ourselves. B takes a4 creates two outside pass pawns. I mean, they are doubled, but there's two of them. But it does weaken the structure somewhat. Again, I think white's position is excellent even in that case. So if rook takes c5, what's going to happen? Maybe rook f c8 then, looking to swap. Rook takes c8, rook takes c8. This rook is still an awful long ways away from being able to do much. Whereas with b takes a4, rook f c8, there's always rook takes f7 again. So maybe b takes a4 has a more paralyzing effect. And then if b takes a4, bishop a6, trying to get some freedom for the bishop, there is knight c6, attacking the rook and also threatening knight e7 mate. Maybe that rook could prove handy on the h-file anyways. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with b takes a4. Leave the rook on c7 where it's active. He does play b takes a4. Okay. And bishop a8. So Tomashevsky didn't have any other good square for that bishop. If he put it on d5, c4 would have been the answer. So what to do here? Black's trying to get some activity down the b file, apparently. Rook a7 sort of comes to mind, but I'm not sure pressuring the bishop really leads anywhere. Rook f4 again. We can still look at that move if we like. Rook takes c5, just taking the the pawn. So if rook f4 is played, I mean, this whole time I've just been assuming black is going to play f5 against that. Originally I thought f6, but now I'm thinking f5. So rook f4, f5. Then what? Maybe we return the rook, like play rook f2 or something? Use that time to get the rook back to civilization? Could be. But I'm looking for something more decisive. It seems like white's advantage is approaching decisive proportions here, so something slow like that isn't going to make black resign soon. Then again, I don't see any outright tactical shots either. Ooh, what about... This is a line we have to look at. Knight d7, rook, let's say f to c8. Rook takes c8, rook takes c8, knight b6, forking the rook and the bishop. And then after the rook moves somewhere, let's say rook b8, knight takes a8, rook takes a8, and then rook takes e4 at the very end. That way, white regains the pawn, defends a4. They're up 2 pawns in the endgame. And maybe black can try to resist, but it seems really bad. For someone of Magnus's caliber, that seems like a simple win. That's a forcing line. So knight d7. You could throw in rook b1 check, though, to disrupt us, couldn't he? But then king h2, and we're going to go win the pawn on c5 with our knight. Most likely, that seems crushing. Nevertheless, we probably have to look at it. Knight d7, rook b1 check, king h2. Let's say rook d8. Could even play rook takes c5 there, if we wanted. Because rook takes d7, rook c8, checkmate, or checkmate soon. So knight d7 tempting. Rook f4 I've discarded at this stage, I think. Yeah, rook f4, f5. Didn't seem to be leading anywhere. Maybe rook f4, f5, knight g6. Because then he can't play the rook to c8 because we have knight e7 check. But again, like what was the difference maker? Why is that suddenly good when all this happened on the queen side? I still feel that if rook f4 was strong earlier, he would have played it. Rook f4, f5, knight g6. It's a little murky. I thought I almost had it with that knight d7 move, but then rook b1 does spoil things somewhat. Rook b1, king h2, rook d8. Can we kill black there? I just need like a kill shot. Rook g4, maybe? Threatening knight f6 in some cases. Not sure that's precise enough. Maybe just knight takes c5 then? We could play a move like king h2 right now, kind of a prophylactic move. But black's rook may still invade. So if king h2, let's say rook b2, something like that. What about a5, just pushing the pawn? Probably again, rook comes down. a6, rook takes a2, a7. Black is pretty stuck there, actually. Now that I think about it. His bishop is terrible. And I think at all times this knight d7 idea, maybe trying to go knight b6 soon, could be crushing. So a5, rook b2. Or rook check even. Let's say rook b2. a6, rook takes a2, a7. And what's the immediate threat? Knight d7, rook d8, knight b6. Do we push that a pawn aggressively right away, or do we do something else? These are moments that I personally struggle sometimes with trying to find a win in a position that you know is winning or close to it, and trying to decide between good options. It's a nice problem to have, but as the saying goes, winning in one game is one of the most difficult things to do in chess. I mean, that line I just mentioned kills a lot of his counterplay, I gotta say. You know what, one thing that's nice, like say a5, rook b2, a6, rook takes a2, a7. I don't think he can even play rook d8 there because there's rook h8 check, king takes h8, knight takes f7 check, followed by knight takes on d8, which is a really nifty idea. So I'm kind of coming around to a5, just leaving everything where it is, so maintaining the status quo as far as the rooks and the knight. Not going for knight d7 yet, in which case black will play the rook check anyways. Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say a5. Woohoo. All right, he played it. Yeah, that one took a while, but it starts to make sense. I mean, you think about the pawn getting to a7, even if you lose the a pawn, the other a pawn, which is kind of useless anyways, there's a lot to be said about white's position. So black plays rook b7. All right. So are we trading or doing something else? Or taking on c5, perhaps? So if we trade on b7, bishop takes b7, let's say knight d7, forking the rook and the pawn, rook c8. Still, this rook is a ways from entering the game. I guess black's idea here is that if rook takes c5, then he's going to play rook b2. And then if a6, rook takes a2, and white can't play a7 without losing the pawn. So black's trying to slightly improve on what they had before. Any tactics here? None that I see. If I could get my knight to e7, I'd be checkmating black, but how do I do that? Knight g6, he just takes it. Knight c6, he takes c7. Rook takes e4, he also takes c7. So rook takes c5, let's say rook b2. Maybe we can even be really greedy then and just play, let's say a4. Still there's that idea, rook d8, rook h8 check, which is really nice. So let's say a4, rook a2, a6, he just takes a4 again. So rook takes c5, rook b2. What's going to end his resistance? a3 maybe? Rook a2 again. It's not quite there. He's still flailing about. I wonder if we could play for a mating attack on the other wing. Is that crazy? Rook takes c5, rook b2, knight d7. Idea rook c2, h5, setting up rook h8. Rook c5, rook b2, knight d7. Rook d8. Rook over here. It's pretty crude, but it could be effective. How does black deal with that? Yeah, if g6, just check and pick up the rook on d8. That might be winning. That'd be a heck of a way to end the game. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think, I've been mentioning rook b2 the whole time, but if black goes rook b1 check, we're always just playing king h2 without much difference. So one more time, rook takes c2, rook takes c5, rook b2, knight d7, hitting the rook. Probably the rook goes to d8, either d8 or e8. Those are the only squares. So let's say d8. And then rook c to h5, threatening mate. And whether he plays f6 or g6, we're still giving a check and winning the undefended rook on d8. Beautiful. All right, let's see if that's right. Rook takes c5 was played. Black plays rook a7 instead. Could this meet with the same fate? I mean, here, knight d7, rook takes d7, rook h5, there's f6. And then his king will escape to f7 and the rook will be defended, so not quite. But the seed has been planted. I saw the number of moves originally, so I think black resigned after white's next move. So let's see if I can nail this one and force black's resignation. Still scanning for tactics involving getting the rook over to h5. Not quite seeing anything, though. I mean, maybe knight c4. Trying to come into b6. Like, what's a move that's really just going to force black to resign? Knight c4 is the move I want to play. Because I think knight c4, knight b6 is very pleasant. Get the knight in to attack the bishop. Protected by the pawn. Black's rook on a7 is basically worthless. Also, we enable the rook over to h5. Same idea as before. That might just be decisive. Not seeing any other compelling knight moves. I mean, we already covered knight d7. He can just take it. This rook isn't going to go anywhere, I don't think. Don't think he's going to push a pawn. So almost by process of elimination, I'm looking at knight c4. I think we have enough information to say that knight c4 is probably the move. I've analyzed that enough. All right, so let's see. There we go, knight c4. And did black give up? Yep, black resigned here. It does look pretty grim. So white is up, what, 2 pawns? It's black to move. They're dealing with threats like knight b6 and the rook coming over to h5. Yeah, that's depressing. Okay, so thus concludes my very first solitaire game that I played on this channel. You can see it was a little rough at times, and it actually took a lot longer than I thought it would, explaining my thoughts on video like this. As I said, you can set a timer and try to use a timer to go through the moves to really do a good job and try to give yourself the best chance of predicting what these guys played. You probably need to spend at least a couple hours on a top flight game like this because that's what they spent during the game, and you're trying to predict super GM moves. But I think this can be a useful method even if you're going a little bit faster. One of the main purposes in reviewing games played by players who are better than you is to try to ingrain certain patterns in your head. And I know for me, I'm going to take away some stuff from this game. And by the way, let's just load the engine right at the end here. You guys can't see the engine eval, but I just put on Stockfish just to confirm what it is at the end. So it says, Stockfish says about +2 here. Seems like maybe a premature resignation by Tomashevsky, but I'm sure he didn't want anything more of this position. So quickly going back through the game and trying to highlight some of the moments. So we didn't talk about the opening. I didn't try to predict any of the moves in the opening because this was standard theory. I agreed with all the decisions, and you want to start at a position that is new to you, not one where you're just trying to rehearse moves or observe the opponents rehearsing opening moves. So for me, that was right around here. I picked this move to start. So queen e2, white connected the rooks. And then these two moves, rook fe1 and rook ad1, surprised me. And this whole concept of letting black take on f4 if Tomashevsky likes surprised me. You can see Magnus's idea was to recapture and gain a stranglehold on e5. So that's something I will take away personally. Also, I made a big assumption. This move was surprising too, by the way. Bishop takes g6, eliminating the knight that was attacking that bishop on f4. So I made a big assumption that after f4, which is a move I correctly predicted, that upon takes, white would simply recapture. Rook f1 was not even on my radar. And also, a little after this, knight d7, queen h5, another move I didn't predict whatsoever. And these moves, rook f1 and queen h5, contributed most, it seems to me, as far as Magnus whipping up a decisive attack here and capitalizing on his initiative. Because once he played rook takes f4, he had great pressure on black's king, and knight e4 led to this endgame variation, which I did correctly predict, trading and then the rook coming into d7, and b3 a little bit surprising, taking his time, as is Magnus's custom. I was predicting rook f4 here, but I would bet if rook f4, f5 is going to be the answer as opposed to f6. So he just let black flail in the wind. b3 is saying to black that you have no good moves here, and I can sit on the position because I know you can't challenge me. And he's probably right. And then rook c7. I'm glad I was able to adjust and figure out that white's going to go after the c pawn, and then here take the pawn on a4, again leaving black pretty helpless. And some accuracy was required here. So I am satisfied that I predicted most of the remaining moves correctly. So, congratulations if you stayed through this whole video. I know this one went long. And again, this is only a 30-move game. But if you like, incorporate this solitaire chess method, guessing the move, into your training regimen and see if it brings you results. I think this will be helpful more so for you higher-rated players out there. But if you're lower-rated and you want a challenge, you can give this a shot too. It's pretty fun, seeing if you can play like Carlsen or Kasparov or Fischer or whoever you're studying. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave me any feedback in the comments, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.